like to call the meeting to order, and if we could start off with a roll call, please.
Let me get this going. Okay, Commissioner Allen? Here. Commissioner Yessie? Here. Commissioner Marin?
Here.
Commissioner Woodham?
Here.
Commissioner Samples?
Here.
Commissioner Sherbin?
Here.
Chair Castle?
Here. And
Thank
would
you.
you please stand while we salute the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next is to approve the order of agenda. Do we have a motion, or do we have any blue folder items to add to the agenda tonight?
No blue folder items tonight.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the order of agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Next is item F, the consent calendar. We have one item tonight for the approval of the affidavit of posting for the regular Budget and Finance Commission meeting for November 14th tonight. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
There are no excluded consent calendar items tonight. Are there any public participation on non-agenda items tonight?
There's no participants on Zoom, and there's no public e-comments.
Okay, thank you. There are no items continued from previous agendas, and that brings us down to item J, items for discussion prior to action. First tonight, we'll have the annual review of the city's statement of investment policy for 2024. And I guess along with that, the city treasurer's report for Q1 will follow. So I'll turn it over to Treasurer Solomon.
Great, thank you. Chair Castle, Eugene Solomon, Redondo Beach City Treasurer. Commissioners, tonight we have several items for you, as the chair mentioned. The first item is our regular reporting of our city investment policy. This year, we have a slight change that we're requesting for your review in the city's investment policy, which is to add the ability to include a JPA within our policy itself that we haven't had before. One of your colleagues, Commissioner Allen, has raised the idea of using a JPA previously as a tool. We explored that idea, did some research with several different JPAs, and we have both the change potentially for you to review tonight and a suggestion for a vendor to choose for that JPA. With that, I'll hand it over to our Deputy City Treasurer, Nilesh Mehta.
Aaron, can you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone. Nilesh Mehta, Deputy City Treasurer. So as Eugene mentioned, we have a recommendation for the investment policy for 2024, and we'll go over that in detail. Along with the two of us, we have Kyle Tanaka from CAMP, and we also have Rick Phillips. He's connected via Zoom. I don't know if he can hear us.
I don't see anyone yet, but I'll keep checking and refresh.
Okay. Oh boy, I thought he was joining. All right, well, introduction to our investment policy. So the city treasurer strives to maintain a well-balanced and diversified investment portfolio that meets the investment criteria and performance objectives of the city's statement of investment policy. Section 23 of the policy specifies that the city treasurer present the city's statement of investment policy for annual review and adoption by the city council, as well as the annual review by the Budget and Finance Commission. So our recommendation for the amendment is Section N. We have recommended to add joint powers authority with a maximum limit of 20%. With this being said, the city may invest up to 20% of its portfolio in shares issued by a joint powers authority established under California Government Code Section 6509.7. These investments must meet the following. Each share shall represent an equal proportional interest in the underlying pool of securities owned by the JPA. The JPA issuing the shares must retain an investment advisor um, issuing the investment must retain an investment that meets all the following criteria. Is registered or exempt from registration with the SEC, has a minimum of 5 years of experience, and manages assets in excess of $500 million. So when you look at our recommended investment policy, which is attached in the packet, you'll see at the bottom, we have added JPA with a maximum percentage limit of 20%, maximum issuer percentage of 20%, and then listed at the bottom right column is the California Government Code section. So one of the JPAs that we have recommended is called California Asset Management Program. And the program administrator for this program is Kyle Tanaka, and I've included his email address if you have any further questions for him. He's also available here to answer any. So what CAMP is ideal for? Is ideal for operating funds, separate accounting, and proceeds of debt issues. It's rated AAA-M by S&P Global, has same-day liquidity, so 11 p.m. is the cutoff time for being able to transfer monies as needed. Unlimited transaction capability via wire, ACH, or check. Online account management, option to open multiple sub-accounts, no minimum investment. Interest is paid monthly. There's no additional out-of-pocket expenses, and specialized services for bond proceeds. So essentially what CAMP is a option for us to be able to deposit monies that currently are being invested in LAIF or in our money market account. LAIF is currently at about 4.5%. Our money market account is currently at 4.7%. And just most recently, CAMP is looking at about 4.9. So in terms of the benefit of the higher yield, there is value in CAMP. The pool's objective is to earn a competitive rate of return while preserving principal, providing liquidity, and seeking a stable net asset value of $1. So these are the characteristics, and this is as of August 31st, but Kyle's here to provide a more updated data if you want to step up to the podium.
Thank you, Neelish, and hopefully this works well. Can everybody hear me all right? Awesome. Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity to be here today and answer any questions that you might have about the program. Just to give you a quick update on our current numbers, our total assets in the fund closed today at $17.8 billion. That's representative of almost 300 or a little bit over 340 public agencies, municipalities, over 100 are cities in the program. Neelish also mentioned the 7-day yield. You can see back as of August was at 5.42%. Today it was at 4.91, so 4.9 as well.
And then did you want to go over the sector composition of?
Sure. So with the pool in particular, you'll see very high quality short-term fixed income investments, really operating similar to what I would call, or similar to a money market fund, just kind of wrapped in the sticker of a joint powers authority. This is a report that we publish for our shareholders on a monthly basis. Just giving you an idea of the kind of investments that are in the overall pool or the underlying holdings in the pool, as well as the rating criteria assigned to those investments. So at the previous slide, there was the very first bullet said the pool was rated AAA-M by S&P. It's the highest rating for local government investment pools. There you go. And what is required to maintain that rating for the pool is weekly external reporting of our holdings to S&P. So in my mind, really, when you're considering investing public funds, you have to walk down the criteria of safety, liquidity, then yield. And so for me, that's why safety and really that first bullet point leads off this presentation. You also saw the pool's objective on the previous, or the one forward slide. of maintaining a stable net asset value of $1. The reason why we're allowed to market the program as $1 or a stable NAV of $1 in, $1 out is because the pool elected to follow GASB 79, which it then places additional criteria on the type of investments that we're allowed to hold in the pool, how long the investments are, and that allows us for the dollar in, dollar out principle to come into play. English.
I think Commissioner Woodham has a question for you,
Yeah,
sir.
Cal,
Yes, sir.
question. Knowing the kind of funds that we're talking about here, you've shown an interest or a rate of return of anywhere from 20 to 60 basis points higher than LAIF. Can you tell us what you're investing in that allows you to do that? How is your portfolio different than LAIF?
Sure, and the example of a money market fund is probably better, a better equivalent in my eyes. The reason is that you have credit capability or to invest in credit or corporations. And that's what GASB 79 allows for and California Government Code allows for. That's where you would see that ability to invest in, I'm just, not that we hold them, but that an example, John Deere. For example, so anytime that corporation is issuing debt, we can participate in that. Toyota, your Apple, kind of these large, significant financial institutions as well, in my eyes. So that's the difference probably that you would see in comparison to a money market fund that has a stable NAV because there was money market reform back in 2010. And so that's what they moved to then a floating net asset value. So far, GASB 79 funds have not moved to adopt those same regulations as money market funds. And so it's allowing for credit essentially for the pool like CAMP to invest in these corporations essentially.
By credit, you're saying, you mentioned a couple of companies in the spread, so you're able to invest in their short-term securities.
Correct, while still offering a stable net asset value. So that's really the difference in the mechanisms kind of between, I would say, a money market fund vehicle. LAIF traditionally invests in, I'd say more of a buy and hold strategy, and we'll get to it on that slide as well, of how these pools are managed from an investment perspective. Really in that middle graph that you see in front of you, the weighted average maturity is why you see the yield disparity between. So not that it's investing in something different than the state pool, I would say it's a different objective between the state pool and CAMP. That's why I use the money market fund as kind of the example that I would say is a comparison in terms of what we're investing in that's different than that space. For LAIF, we have the same ability to invest in the same type of securities under California Government Code. But to answer your question in a very long-winded way, the reason why the yield disparity exists between our two pools is because of that middle bar, the weighted average maturity.
Okay, thanks.
You want me to cover?
Yeah, go
Okay.
for it.
So I mentioned GASB 79. Really, to me, this is the heart of our program. By electing to follow GASB 79, you see these different bullet points of different criteria that is placed on CAMP to follow to adhere to that stable $1 in, $1 out principle or stable NAV. To me, I really like focusing on liquidity, again, kind of thinking about as you walk your way down from safety, liquidity, then yield. Liquidity, what it means to follow GASB 79 in that bullet point of liquidity means that 10% of our fund, so of that $17.8 billion today, has to be maintained in daily liquid investments. And that is so that we can meet any redemptions or withdrawals on the fund. Taking it one step forward, 30% of the fund at all times has to be invested in weekly liquid assets. Again, for that same principle to meet any redemptions or any inflows, outflows on the fund. Question I often get from boards is, what does the percentage look like? 10%, 30% daily are the standards. Oftentimes we run higher than that, and especially in times of market uncertainty, you'll see us push higher. So a more recent example that I have of this is during the regional bank failures back in March of 23. we were running close to 20% of our pool in daily liquid assets and almost 50 in weekly liquid assets. So we wanted to make sure that no matter what, we have the funds available, or that we're able to sell the underlying securities of the pool to meet any redemptions in or out. And so that's one way that we try and mitigate risk. But just an example of one of the criteria that GASB 79 places on the pool.
Just have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
Maybe you could explain for me. If you're using an amortized cost to value your assets, how do you determine your market value on an interim basis?
Yeah, that's a great question. So GASB 79 actually allows for you to value, your market value is your share price, because we utilize GASB 79. So, and that amortized cost for accounting.
And how do you evaluate your performance on an interim basis before the maturity of the asset?
We strike NAVs on the funds or in the underlying securities 3 times a day, which allows us for different pricing throughout intraday. We will never show that necessarily to our shareholders. You'll have a single end of day strike as kind of the of record. But for us internally, that's how we evaluate throughout the day, different costs and different times where we strike an NAV.
Yep, thank you.
Yep. Lastly, I'd say this slide is kind of, it's one of my favorite slides. So PFM Asset Management is the investment advisor for CAMP and the program administrator. We have about 18 different pools across the country. I always make fun of or joke around with my colleagues about just how large CAMP is. And what that represents. You can see a total combined 81 billion in assets in different pools, but also over 6,000 different public agencies or municipalities throughout the state. So even though this is somewhat niche, to me, it's really kind of our bread and butter.
A question, why 18 government investment pools? Is this regional determined, or why not one pool?
Yeah, so it is state specific, because just how California has California government code for what you can invest into. An example kind of outside of the investment realm is just the governance of joint powers authorities is a unique concept to certain states. So a state like, I'll pick out Louisiana, probably to my knowledge doesn't have anything in their state charter that allows for agencies to come together and create a pool like this. So that's what you run into a lot, or also sometimes in states they mandate that the only pooled option is within the state treasurer itself. I mentioned PFM is both the investment advisor and the administrator for the program. Just to kind of give you a sense of the other service providers associated with it, U.S. Bank is our custodian, as well as having both Ernst & Young for our auditor and Nossaman as our legal counsel. So 2 additional kind of national firms and a large financial institution that are also a part of this process. And then there's some lovely disclosure language. Are there any additional questions I can answer from this group?
How long have you been doing this in California?
Yeah, so CAMP has been in the state since 1989. I myself began my career working at another local government investment pool about 7-8 years ago. And then I've been with CAMP since about 5 years ago, just crossed 5 years. And I took over as the program administrator last year.
So since 1989, you've been through several interest rate cycles, some rapidly increasing rate periods. Have you had trouble maintaining the $1?
Never. We've never, in theory, broken the buck or proverbial broken the buck or put any gates or fees associated to redemptions on the fund, which is something that we were quite proud of.
Even in 08, 07 and 08?
Yep.
Okay.
What are your fees?
Fees. So with us, we operate from a total assets under management. So on that first slide, you saw that there was no out-of-pocket fees. It's because it's being taken out of the yield for the entire pool. So beneficial to shareholders that there's not that direct cost. Currently, our fee schedule is tiered, but I would say it's 9.45 basis points. I always tell folks round up to 10. So tonight I'm talking about us having a 7-day yield of 4.91. In theory, our gross yield then would be 5.01.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.
Curious
Sorry, one more.
question. What in the heck is Joint Powers Authority? I was confused by seeing that in here, and you're under Joint Powers Authority. Apparently that's some authority within the state that allows this to happen, but I'm not sure that I understand what it is.
Yes, sir. So joint powers authorities are a form of local government inside of California. It's when two or more agencies come together to provide some type of service. Often you'll see a financing authority between two cities or a city and a special district. So it's this concept of essentially economies of scale, in my mind, to share resources between agencies. So I don't believe it's the intention yet for the city, but if the city ever one day wanted to join CAMP as a joint powers authority member, the city council would take a resolution and pass it, and then that's how you could become part of the JPA itself. Currently, I believe the consideration is just to join as what I would call a investor. So you're just utilizing it as an investment vehicle, but it's certainly an option open to the city as well. And with that, you gain voting authority within the program.
Okay.
So if the city were to join the JPA, the only difference is the voting capability within the JPA. And what do the JPA, what do the partner agencies vote on?
So you would gain a couple of benefits. Personally, in my eyes, it's a good governance question. I have a bias towards, I wish all of our members were JPA members. And there is no additional cost for that, but essentially you would vote on any programmatic changes that happen. Once a year, we do a proxy, asking you to confirm our board members or our trustees who are representative of our JPA finance members at their own institution or municipality. We ask our shareholders to ratify them. If there was ever interest from having somebody from the city serve on the CAMP board and there was an opening, you would need to be a JPA member first. And if there were any, good example is we have an additional investment option called CAMP Term that came out about 3 years ago. That had to go before our JPA members to ratify before we even offered it as an investment solution. That's not currently what this committee is looking at, but in the future that would be something or reasons why I would hope folks would consider joining.
So you only have access to that new program if you're a JPA member as opposed to an investor?
No, you can still access it. That program operates significantly different than what we've talked about here tonight for the pool. So I think there would need to be further discussion that we would need to have to even see if it was worth presenting and if it fit kind of the city's overall objectives. It operates like a CD program, just to kind of give you an insight, but you lose that liquidity aspect. And so for me, I would caution, and we would need to have a lot more conversation about if it was appropriate.
What percentage of your members are investors versus JPA members?
Roughly 45% of our shareholders are participants or JPA members. The other 55 is investors. Usually the quickest way to join the program is as an investor because it just requires it to be in the investment policy for the city as opposed to taking a resolution.
One additional question, pardon me for going back to the beginning of your presentation. What do you have in assets under management in the California version of this where we're investing?
Yeah, as of today, it was 17.8 billion.
Okay, thanks.
Kyle, did you want to go over the cities in the area that are participating in CAMP currently?
Yeah, so just off the top of my head, or down some, the most close ones here, obviously, Torrance, El Segundo, Gardena, Signal Hill, not close, but Jasmine mentioned Burbank as well. Pretty much any, will always go as long as, like, if it makes sense for a city or a municipality. There's other special districts around the area too that we work with. 45 of the 58 counties as well.
Are there any other questions?
I guess this would be a question for Mr. Solomon. Right now, we're talking about the city joining as an investor. Have you considered the idea of us becoming a JPA member, and what would that involve in our city? Is that a charter change, or is that simply a resolution at the city council?
As Kyle expressed, it would be a resolution of the city council. Right now, what we're seeking is a change is two steps. One is the ability in our investment policy to invest with a JPA. And then the second part of it being that we selected CAMP as a JPA for us to work with as an investor. We've limited that exposure to in the investment policy to up to 20%, matching where our money market is now. We did not explore the concept of joining as an investor.
If I might add one thing too, you can join as an investor and then join or switch to a participant at any time. So also, if the city is comfortable with the program and wants to take that additional step for governance, or if you had the interest of serving on the CAMP board, that can be done at any time as well.
Another question to the treasurer. 20% to Joint Powers Authority. Would all of that now currently go to CAMP, or?
If this change is approved, we are recommending that CAMP be the Joint Powers Authority that we use. Could we coordinate with a different JPA? Yes.
Did you evaluate other ones, or what made you choose CAMP?
We did look at other organizations, and we decided that CAMP was the best alternative for us now.
Based on?
Based on looking at the ease of use, portfolio returns, some of those other factors, some of which Kyle mentioned here tonight with regard to liquidity and other programming.
So this investment is similar to LAIF and similar to money market. So remind me, what is our maximum allocation to money markets and to LAIF?
We can invest up to 100% in LAIF. We can invest up to 20% in our money markets.
Okay.
How much money are you anticipating kind of moving, assuming we did this, what would be your recommendation in terms of percentage of allocating into this JPA, and where would it come from? When you take it out of money market, when you take it out of LAIF, what are your thoughts?
This is more of a liquid option, so it would be part of our cash side.
Okay.
That would be, we would look at comparisons of where the money market account is versus CAMP and make a determination on that.
Gotcha.
We've almost completely divested of LAIF.
Okay.
So this offers us an alternative superior to LAIF.
Fair.
And I also wanted to add, back when I was researching the JPAs, CAMP had the highest yield,
Okay.
and also they were the oldest.
Longest history, highest yield.
Yes.
And
yes.
fees were relatively the same.
They had the lowest fees, and they've been around since 1989. The others were much newer,
Gotcha.
2013, 20.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
As long as history. Makes sense.
And they have the biggest pool, the 17.8 billion in, yeah. The others, I think the largest one after that was 5 billion.
Gotcha.
So it was the most credible one.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you. So with this, I think we would need a motion to receive and file the.
Oh, I just wanted to add,
sorry.
there's no public comments, but we do have Rick Phillips on Zoom.
Okay.
So I believe he's part of the treasury team.
Okay.
And Rick was involved as our external investment advisor in coordinating this change in our investment policy.
Okay.
Rick, did you want to add anything to what's been said tonight?
We do have other clients that use CAMP. We've evaluated CAMP and the holdings, know Kyle well. And again, from an investment advisor perspective, we approve of this change as well.
So from the perspective of what we could get from the commission tonight, if the commission wanted to make the recommendation, we could advance that suggestion that the Budget and Finance Commission reviewed this investment change, reviewed the potential of working with CAMP as our JPA, and would like to make recommendation based on the feedback and the questions that they asked to make those two changes. If we had that from the commission tonight, we could express that to the council on Tuesday.
Okay. Would any commissioners like to make a motion?
So I can say the committee would approve adding CAMP JPA to our investment policy.
I think that would be,
Presented to us.
yes.
As recommended by staff.
Yes, as recommended by staff.
I would
So
second the
moved.
motion.
Could we have a roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Allen?
Aye.
Commissioner Jesse?
Aye.
Commissioner Marin?
Aye.
Commissioner Woodham?
Aye.
Commissioner Samples?
Aye.
Commissioner Sherbin?
Aye.
Chair Castle?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is item J2, which would be the city treasurer's Q1 fiscal year 25 report.
Thank you, Chair Castle, Eugene Solomon, Redondo Beach City Treasurer. As we do on a quarterly basis, we are bringing you tonight our report for your review and any questions that you might have. Our Deputy City Treasurer, Nilesh Mehta, has this report for you. And as you heard a moment ago, we have our investment advisory group, Rick Phillips, on the line, should you have any questions of Rick. So I'd like to hand it over to Nilesh for this presentation.
Good evening, all. Nilesh Mehta once again. So today we'll be going over the Treasurer's Quarterly Report for fiscal year 2024-25, Q1. Within your packet, you'll see the portfolio summary, the investment reporting guidelines, and the investment report by meter investment, which includes the portfolio summary, policy compliance, investment activity report, as well as the economic and market update. And we'll be going over the objectives and guidelines, policy compliance, quarterly performance, historical book value, cash flow analysis, month-end portfolio book yield, maturity distribution, trading impact, or trading activity, and finally the fiscal impact. Key investment objectives for municipal investing. It's important to maintain the city's cash flows while earning a competitive rate of return on the investments within the constraints of the city's investment policy and state law. As we have mentioned in the past, safety, liquidity, and yield. Protection of principal, provide necessary liquidity to cover both ongoing and unexpected cash needs. And finally, maximizing earnings, recognizing the need for safety and liquidity, and subject to restrictions specified by state statutes and the local governing body. Investment reporting guidelines. Always remember whose money it is and act accordingly in a responsible stewardship capacity. An investment manager's objective is to earn a reasonable rate of return on the city's investments while preserving capital in the overall portfolio. It should never be an investment manager's goal to earn maximum returns on the city's portfolio, as this would expose the city to an unacceptable level of risk. Failure in public investing occur when policies were not clear, when they were inappropriate, they were not followed, or oversight was inadequate. So questions to ask is, do you review the investment policy? Do you understand the investment program? Do you receive and review periodic investment reports? Are they clear, concise, and readable? And finally, do you understand them? So the next slide goes over the policy compliance for the quarter. You know what? I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Let me make this bigger. So if you look at the column on the right, we were in compliance, and it goes over the weighted average maturity, 1.45, We had a liquidity of 42.14%. And you'll see I'll go back to the presentation here. So here's the 24-25 performance for Q1. We have about $7.5 million in Bank of America, about $6.5 million in money market. We had about 100,000 in LAIF. Federal agencies were about 35 million. Corporate notes about 12.5 million, and bank CDs 250,000. And in treasuries, we had about 38.5 million. At the end of the quarter, the LAIF yield was 4.58%. The yield on the benchmark was 4.21%. And then if you look back and you compare with fiscal year 23-24, you'll see that at that time, the LAIF yield was 3.5%, and interest earned year to date is 675,000, and currently we're at 615,000. And then here's the breakdown of the performance from 22-23. Significant change in the interest earned year to date from 2 years ago.
Question while you're going through this.
Yes.
Do you use LAIF and money markets interchangeably depending upon the rate of return? Do you have the same liquidity with LAIF that you do with the money market?
That is correct. So as we had increased our balances in the money market, we decreased the balances within LAIF. Historical book value by fiscal year, and this goes back to fiscal year 2021. You'll see that around the same period of time, we had about 75 million, and we're currently at 97 million. This is a historical chart of the book value of our portfolio going back to 2009, and you'll see the ups and downs in our portfolio. And then here's the cash flow analysis for the for the quarter. And we have met the cash flow needs of the city for the quarter and expect to meet the expenditure requirements for the upcoming period. The month-end portfolio book yield. So going back to October 2023, you'll see that it was about 2.5%, and we're currently right around 3%. The maturity distribution of our portfolio, you'll see that 42% of our investments are maturing within 0 and 1 year, almost 23% within 1 and 2 years, and so on. Trading activity for the quarter, we had in July, we had 1 purchase, 1 redemption. August, we had 2 purchases and 3 redemptions. And September, we had 2 purchases and 1 redemption. Here's the transaction report, and it goes over the purchases that we made in September. And this is provided within all of our investment reports. Fiscal year-to-date earnings for the quarter, as well as the whole year going back to 2024. Here's a slide on the yield versus the benchmark, and I think Rick is online to talk a little bit about the benchmark versus our yield and the difference.
So since the portfolio is a buy and hold portfolio, we try to replicate a yield benchmark versus the portfolio's yield. And so the universe is 0 to 5 years for the investment policy. So we take the 0 to 5 year Treasury index and do a 30-month moving average of that to try to replicate over time how we would purchase investments in the portfolio. The benchmark just theoretically purchases and sells every month. New bonds dump into that as the Treasury issues bonds. or if a 5.1-year bond rolls down to a 5-year, it's put into the index. The city's purchases are lumpy, of course, depending on when we get property taxes in or big cash flows going out. We've had some larger than expected cash outflows this last year. And in fact, the portfolio, if you had the October report, it dropped by 10 million. And that's much larger than anticipated, not anticipated than has in the past, I should say. The plan is we have those lower yielding securities that were purchased during the COVID years when interest rates were lower, to be able to reinvest those at higher rates. But since the portfolio has dropped pretty substantially, we've had to keep things shorter and then also not reinvest. Money had to go out. And so we have not been able to reinvest. Nilesh showed a slide earlier. We don't have anything past 3.5 years now because we typically would have those out there to lock in yields right there. And so nothing in the 4 to 5 and that 3 to 4 is under 3.5 years. So that has been the challenge, to keep the yield higher versus the benchmark. And unless if you can go back to the benchmark page. So when interest rates are moving up and down in a more normal fashion, you see clear back to 2012, the benchmark and the portfolio are pretty much in lockstep. But when you have outsized moves to the downside and to the upside, where the portfolio during COVID, when rates went down to zero, the portfolio's yield didn't go down as fast. And then when rates go up really quickly, like they have, the portfolio's yield doesn't go up as fast. And coupled with the point that I just made, we've had to not be able to reinvest some of the maturities because that was needed for cash outflows. So that's mainly the discrepancy of the benchmark versus the portfolio. Probably about January, February, the benchmark will start to roll over because interest rates have come down with the Fed cutting short-term rates as well as just longer-term rates coming down as well from last year. I'll stop there. I talked a lot. Any questions for me?
Yeah, a question. If you look in September, it looks like there's a 150 basis point difference between the benchmark and the portfolio. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a little less than that, but that's about right.
That seems like quite a variance against us. And again, I'm not sure that I understand the reasons why.
No, I just
this is a shorter maturity portfolio, right?
Well,
shorter than the
yeah,
benchmark.
I mean that's kind of what I tried to go over the last few minutes. The reason why the benchmark has gone up, it gets to invest every single month, where we haven't been able to do that, and the investments that we've been able to do, we've had to keep very short to meet liquidity. And Nilesh, do you have our bubble chart in this package?
Yeah, let me pull it up.
So this bubble chart, once he gets there, just shows the average yield for all the securities by every 6 months. And so you see that 2.74, that's the maturity, that's the average yield of maturities from zero overnight out to 6 months. The plan would be to reinvest that 2.74 at much higher rates in the 4% level now. But that's needed for cash flow, and it has been needed for cash flow. And so we haven't been able to, cash has gone out. We were, let me get back. I mean,
Maybe
gone down. Go ahead.
Maybe the better question to ask is, how does our return compare to other cities or counties with similar portfolios? I understand the difficulty of matching the returns depending upon maturities and new money coming in. But I would assume that there are several other cities, several other municipalities that have a similar portfolio. Is our return comparable to theirs? And I assume you have other clients like us. So how close is our portfolio to others? Are we median, better than average, worse than average?
So the yield on the portfolio is lower than average for other clients, primarily because the city's cash needs have been greater on a percentage than our other clients. Our other clients haven't needed as much cash, and actually most of their portfolios are higher than last fiscal year in value. And so therefore, we've been able to reinvest maturities that were purchased, securities and purchased with lower yields, now at higher yields. But with the city of Redondo Beach, that's not the case because there's been a greater need of cash. And so, Nilesh, if you can go back to the portfolio value page.
Portfolio value.
Have it by fiscal year. Do you have the one by fiscal year?
Let me see.
Right there. Yeah. The colored lines. Go one more, go to the next page. So you see on the left-hand side that, I guess it's kind of a teal line. And so you see it's lower than last fiscal year. And if we had October, it actually dropped by 10 million. And so it's a substantial cash drawdown. And therefore we haven't been able to reinvest at higher rates. Our other cities in the county, in the area, in California, almost all of those are higher. They have a higher fiscal year value than last fiscal year. And so therefore we've been able to invest maturities at higher rates, where the city of Redondo Beach, something matures, we've had to just let it go outside of the portfolio and not be able to reinvest at higher rates. So a long answer to the city's portfolio is generally lower than our other clients due to your cash flow being different.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
I guess while we're here, for Treasurer Solomon, do you expect our cash needs to be greater than they were in the past, or should we be, I guess, accumulating more cash for the portfolio so that we could invest in longer term, higher yielding assets?
A part of it is cyclical, based on, and we expect higher revenues. We are experiencing higher revenues. Property taxes are higher. Some other revenues, sales tax is higher. Some other revenues are flat or slightly trailing previous years, such as UUT. We have other factors internally that have affected our cash flow. All of our employee groups received increases over the course of the last year. So that is increasing our payroll obligations. There are other unexpected, say, CapEx charges, where we might have a CalPERS payment that might come in and be higher than anticipated. So we have that as a factor in our cash flow as well that we recently had to account for. There are other things that happen at the city council level, holding the purse strings of the city. If we go out and buy a new fire engine, or we go out and do something outside of our normal cycle, then that impacts our cash flow needs as well.
Okay. All right, thank you.
And can I add one other thing? Is that okay? Nilesh,
Yes.
do you have the total return page? It's page 13 of our report.
Sure.
So I was previously showing you on a yield basis because we're buy and hold, and that's one way to look at performance. We'll have Nilesh get to the other page. So this is on a total rate of return basis when you factor in the mark-to-market price changes due to interest rates. And these are unrealized gains and losses. And so with interest rates, you see that 1 year performance was over 7%, or let me get to the bigger page, about almost 7%. And so that's just because interest rates have come down so much. And so if you look out to the far right in inception, the portfolio has earned 1.58%, and the benchmark has earned 1.34%. So over the long run, we've had a greater performance in the benchmark on a total return basis when you factor in gains and losses. And that's just one way to look at it. We're more of a buy and hold portfolio. We don't sell, but this is another perspective just to show performance. If you looked at this about a year ago, when interest rates were going up so much, they'd be negative. We would have outperformed the benchmark. we just wouldn't have quote unquote lost as much with unrealized losses. So we've outperformed on a total return basis, but just looking at a book yield, which is much more of an art than a science, it's underperformed just because the index gets to buy every month and it's different than a total return basis. But I just wanted to offer those different perspectives as you're looking at performance.
And just one more time on the index, you said it had is it a duration of 30 months?
No, the duration is a little longer. It's about 2.1, about 2 duration.
Okay.
Where the portfolio is much shorter at 1.4 duration, just because we've had to keep it shorter due to cash flow. So we've had a mismatch on the duration, and that's a factor. It's not as big as factor, but that's a factor as well.
Okay.
So, sorry about that. Fiscal year impact. Interest earned year to date, $615,313. We contribute approximately 60% of that to the general fund, which is almost $370,000. And for the fiscal year, we have a budgeted contribution of $1.5 million. So that's the end of our quarterly report presentation. If you guys have any questions for us, please feel free to ask.
Are there any other questions from the commission?
One question. You sent a monthly report to City Council. Are we getting that on our dedicated email address, city address?
Correct. You're getting it monthly as well.
I had the question of why I wasn't getting it, and I just recalled I've not been checking my city email, so the report is sitting there.
They're also posted on the city's website under the treasurer's treasurer's page.
I have a question for the commissioners. Would you be interested in seeing what they purchase every quarter when we meet? For them to add that to a slide, what the purchases, the securities that they purchase?
Do we have that? We did get that list at one point, didn't we?
Yeah, and we did last time, but not this time. But is it something you think it's useful for you to see what they purchase or no?
Yeah.
Directionally, I think
I don't personally.
I'm supportive of it. I mean, again, you're only, on a monthly basis, you're doing what, 1 to 2 purchases?
Yeah, that's all they, yeah. Because I always show what I purchase to the council. That's what I was wondering, because it should say the yield when it matures, so that we can see what goes in the market and what's available out there, what was purchased, what type of security was purchased. That's really what this is about.
Yeah, I'm supportive of it. It's not a lot of extra work.
No, because they already have it in their tables.
To clarify, it would be if we go out and purchase a corporate, a treasury, an agency, a CD, something of that nature.
Not putting it in money market or something like that. No.
Got it. So prior to our quarterly reports, on an ongoing monthly basis, you like to see if there were any transactions, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yeah, so there'll be probably 1 or 2 transactions. That's all it is. Yeah, it doesn't require, it requires 5 minutes of work.
If we have a transaction, we can go ahead and include that information as part of your consent calendar. Just give it to, provided when the agenda is created, so that you would have it available to review. It wouldn't be a discussion item or an agendized item, but it would be included in your information.
Right.
And Commissioners,
Just
this is Rick again.
something interesting for us to look at, because the first 10 slides that is presented to us, these are the same slides over and over. If we can maybe reduce those instead, or just because we're talking about liquidity safety.
I'd err on the side of the more information is better.
So
I'd rather
I
be
just
more
want something
comprehensive.
a little juicy for us, interesting to look at the presentation.
Okay.
That's Just something interesting.
The sizzle.
Yes, yes.
I'm sorry, Rick, I think you had something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, there's a transaction report on your monthly report that you get. It was page 25 on the September report. It's always included, so.
Yeah.
Yes, and those are, it's a summary of everything, all the
You just want to
purchases.
see the actual
Yes,
purchases. And
since the presentation.
yeah, gotcha.
Just, like you said, this is.
Right, any other comments? And do we have any? Oh, sorry.
I only have one question for Mr. Solomon, only because he's so good at this. Can you gaze into your crystal ball and based on our interest income and investment performance for our first quarter, can you project over the next 3? And are we going to make that 1.5 million target, or are we going to be above or below?
I wouldn't presume to predict the market. I would say that a lot of things that are happening right now are really very interesting, where since the election, you've seen bond yields rise. You've seen the 10-year exceed 4.6% again. You've seen where it was perhaps around 3.9 just a few months ago. You're seeing 2 years going out at 4.3% or thereabouts. Even with the Fed cutting 75 points in the last few months, the market has responded in a different way. Chairman Powell today indicated that they would not perhaps be cutting rates again in the near term. So when you consider all of those things, it would seem that the market, the yields that we're going to be out searching for are going to be somewhere near where we are right now, and would tend to allow us to uphold that hypothetical of meeting our stated goal, rather than concern over a significant erosion in rates. But I would not be so bold as to predict rates.
So you think we're going to make our target? Just don't go.
I think so, from looking at the numbers.
I don't know if I could dance any better than that, Commissioner Samples.
Just don't spend it early,
Yes,
right?
because your things are locked in. So if he's asking for the remaining of the year, I would say yes, because those are locked in.
It is my earnest hope. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioners, may I just add to that? It also really depends on the portfolio's balance. As Treasurer just said, we crystal ball on rates, but we do have locked in securities with the bulk of the portfolio. But if we have to use a lot of the portfolio for outflows, that's the challenge, because we just won't have as large a principal to earn interest on, or this remaining the fiscal year.
Right.
Usually by this time, we've had our largest single hits to our outflows, correct?
Other than our normal payroll and AP,
Yeah.
pretty typically, yes.
Like CalPERS, those usually
Those
hit
are
by-
July, October.
Yeah.
Yes, I would agree with that statement. And we'll have property taxes come in
Right.
in December. We'll have an analysis of what
January.
we can do with that. We have other revenues which have not been presented to us that we're hoping come back online in the near future, such as the Marine Avenue Hotel transit occupancy tax. It's something that's been hurting our bottom line, to be certain. We have other perhaps revenue sources that could come online in the next 12 months, but it's hard to say. You might see a hotel open up over at the Legato project on the corner of PCH and Palos Verdes Boulevard. We might see other factors that come in. We're hopeful of those things coming online sooner than later.
Very good.
Any other
In a
questions?
resort on the beach.
Yes. And the California Surf Club will be there for your resort on the beach.
Okay, do we have any outside comments?
No public comments at this time.
Okay. Do I have a motion to receive and file?
So moved.
Second.
Could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Allen?
Aye.
Commissioner Yessie?
Aye.
Commissioner Marin?
Aye.
Commissioner Woodham?
Aye.
Commissioner Samples?
Aye.
Commissioner Sherman?
Aye.
Chair Castle?
Aye.
Motion passed.
All right, thank you. Next on the agenda are the nominations and elections for the chairperson and vice chair of the Budget and Finance Commission. Traditionally, the two newest members are selected as chair and vice chair. We could go with our traditional policy, and if anyone has any other questions. So that would be Commissioner Sherbin as chair and Commissioner Allen as vice chair. So I would make a motion that we would make them chair and vice chair. Do I have a second?
Second.
Do they have any objections?
Do you have, are there?
Are you open to doing it?
Not at all.
I'm just trying to understand what my attendance record's going to be here in the next year. I think it'll be all right, but we would be the only hesitation that I have.
Okay. And I mean, I think, just based on the new policies from the council and Mayor Light, if you, work together ahead of time and let Commissioner Allen know that, you might have to miss a meeting or.
I will be able to do that, yes.
Okay. I think that should be sufficient.
Sounds good.
Yes, sounds good.
Okay. So do I have a second? Sorry.
And I'm fine, yes. I'll second it.
Okay. Could we have a roll call, please?
Yeah, also, there were no public comments.
No public comment.
Commissioner Allen,
Aye.
Commissioner Yessie, Commissioner Marin,
Aye.
Commissioner Woodham,
Aye.
Commissioner Samples,
Aye.
Commissioner Sherbin,
Aye.
Chair Castle.
Aye. Okay. Okay, thank you. Next on our agenda, the fiscal year 24-25 Q1 financial report from July through September of 2024. And tonight we have our finance director, Director Meyer.
All right, good evening, commissioners. It's nice to follow on all that discussion about our cash flow. Once you get a little preview here. So as usual, we're here to present the first quarter financial reporting. This is through September 30th. And again, as usual, we include a comparison to the first quarter of our prior years so we can see where we are in terms of percentage revenue received and just our overall revenue compared to prior year. So we start with our most important, our tax revenue. And this is, I'm going to be saying the exact same thing throughout this presentation, which is that in general, we are exactly consistent with the percent received, and we are at or slightly above the prior year. And I've kind of broken this out, by our major sources, as you see below. Just as a reminder, for the commission, with our budget, where we expect to have increases on a total dollar value over our prior year is in our property tax, where I think we budgeted about a 5% increase consistent with our assessed value. Sales tax, we kept relatively flat, consistent with our information from our consultants. TOT, we do expect to see a substantial increase over our prior year. However, we wouldn't expect to see that until probably February or February of the following year, because that's dependent on our Marine Avenue hotels coming online, which again, we expect that to be in the January timeframe. So we wouldn't see that revenue coming in until February. And for the remainder, we've actually kept we've kept our expectations for other tax revenue fairly flat. However, as we get a little bit farther into the year and we get some more data points to work with, we will be paying a little bit more attention to, especially where we've increased our expectations, are these revenues coming in as projected? So to date, looks like they're coming in as projected, and we'll continue to look at that closely and keep you updated. Same thing for our non-tax revenue. Something I'll note, again, you've seen this throughout the presentation, is that our overhead revenue and expenditure tends to tilt things a little bit. We have made the decision to book these transactions quarterly, just because it's time consuming and we are paying ourselves. So it doesn't make a difference for anything. But I do note it throughout the presentation because there are discrepancies to the prior year. All that means is that we haven't posted the transaction. So what I've done here for charges for services, normally our overhead appears in that category. I've taken that out because again, we're we're paying ourselves. The external revenue, which is what matters, are the fees that we receive. So we're showing very slightly below prior year, but the percentage received is about the same. This is an area we're going to be looking at closely because we have projected higher revenues than prior year based on some increases that council approved with budget. Again, it's a little bit early for us to be making any determinations from this, but again, we'll be looking at it closely. But we are on track or slightly ahead overall. And again, same thing with the other funds. I'll just switch to this this slide so we can look at it. But the same story with the other funds. We are at where we would expect to be, with the exception of our internal service funds, where again we make our journal entry in October. They'll make the journal entry in October. So you can take a look at this. It's just a summary of everything I've said here. The one thing I did do this time, as I said, in our charges for service category, is to break out the city fees and the city overhead, just because what we should really focus on here is the city fees and how close we are to reaching that. So there's just another views. This is our percentage received for the general fund compared to prior year. As you can see, apart from our little overhead discrepancy there, we're almost exactly in line with the prior year. And then again, we just compare percent run funds received by fund. And again, this 10%, 8% for the general fund, that is our overhead charge. We're not below, in other areas, we're not below the percent received at this point. Only other points we'll point out for the enterprise funds, these are only other funds that kind of track with the general fund where we would expect to see revenue ongoing throughout the year. As a reminder, our revenue, our enterprise funds are harbor tidelands, harbor uplands, transit, wastewater, and sewer. So I did look at the little discrepancy here, and it looks like we have some delays in receiving some of our transit revenue. We expect to get that. We're actually going through a transit audit at the moment, so things are a little bit delayed, but we expect to get that. And then again, the zero reflects we have not charged the overhead yet as of September. So moving on to spending, again, as we like to see, it looks like we are in line with prior year. Our personnel spending is a little bit higher than last year, which again is what we would expect to see with the MOU increases. If you'll remember, the majority of those increases took effect midway through last year, midway through 23-24. So we kind of started to see it last year, but we'll see kind of the full impact this year.
But did you budget that? I mean,
yes.
Yeah. So it's in line with budget and expectations?
Exactly, yes. So it's in line with our expectations. The one piece that we just added some budget for with the carryover report is we added some additional funding for the recent fire MOU increases. So those were ones that council just approved in September. So we hadn't included them initially with the 24-25 budget, but we did just add budget for that with the carryover. Our contracts and services spending is a little ahead of our prior year at the moment. It remains within budget. And again, this is similar story in our other funds where the total and the rate is consistent. There is a little difference that we'll see here in our special revenue funds. And the difference here is we spent a lot of grant funds early on in the year last year. So nothing crazy is happening here. And again, here's our citywide summary. You can see, so personnel, we've spent 10.3 compared to 9.2 last year, 3.7 compared to 3.5. Percentage-wise, almost exactly the same as prior year. So that shows that, our amounts are higher, but this is within what we've budgeted. And again, you see some slightly higher percentages here, or slightly higher percentage here in contracts and services, but we're lower in M&O, and overall consistent with prior year. Again, personnel and fringe is something we'll continue to look at closely as we go through the year, given the known increases that we have. And same as our last one, here we break out general fund by category. Here again, you see our overheads not charged. Capital outlay, I can just show you. If you remember this, for 24-25, we moved actual capital projects out of the general fund. This is consistent with accounting best practice. Our general purpose capital funds are in our capital projects fund. We do have capital outlay, which is a different category. And I think we have one small item. I looked it up and I'm forgetting now exactly what this is, but it's like furniture and furnishings. So it doesn't reach our definition for capital spending, so it's our capital outlay. So we have a very small amount here. It's a furniture purchase and we have already made it. So the fact that this is at 104% is not a cause for panic. That is all we plan to spend this year.
What was the special revenue fund again? I know you've said it.
So yeah, special revenue funds, there's a wide variety of funds, and I'll add this slide to our next one because I laid them out. The biggest one is our grants fund. So our special revenue funds are it's where we put any funding source that we spend for a specific purpose. So again, the largest one in this category is our grants fund. We also have Measure A, Prop A, Proposition C,
Gas tax.
Measure M, CDBG, housing. I'll add this slide to our next one because I think it's helpful because it is a wide variety and we lump them together. But yeah, any special purpose revenue will be in its own fund, and that's in that category. And then here are all of our expenditure rates by fund type. One thing I'll just note, it looks like our percentage spent is significantly higher in a lot of these funds. That is because we are comparing original budget in 24-25 to revised budget. So when we ran this, we had not yet posted, council had not yet approved carryover, which adds significantly to the budget in a lot of these funds because it's our large amounts for capital projects. So we won't see this discrepancy when we look at this in mid-year. And our next steps. So we'll be coming to you with our second quarter review in February, around the same time that you'll see our mid-year budget. So again, this is pretty early look, first few months of the year. We are watching everything very closely, and we'll have some more detailed information for you on the start of the new year. Yes.
General fund budget was somewhere around 115 million, and it was a balanced budget. Nothing to suggest it's not going to be balanced and actual at this point, right?
No. Nope.
Where were the reserves in that chart?
In this one?
Yeah.
So we wouldn't show the reserves here. This is just our operating and capital budget. So.
Is there any slide in here that reserves are somewhere?
No.
Okay.
So again, the purpose of this is to show the progress of our ongoing revenue and spending. Where we talk about the reserves, and we'll show these, is in our carryover report. You saw this, you'll see it again at mid-year. And what we do is we show our overall general fund balance, and we back out our reserves, the PERS reserve, and our commitments and assignments. So that's where you'll see our reserves. But as we noted with our budget, we did not allocate any of those reserves. We did not spend any of those reserves. So that's the only time that you would see the reserves coming in here is if we had allocated.
That's why I was asking
from those
to make
sources,
sure
yeah.
it's not being spent.
It is not. Any questions on our revenue and spending to date?
Do we have any public comments?
No public comments and nobody on Zoom.
Okay. Thank you. And do we have a motion to receive and file?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
And if we could have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Allen?
Aye.
Commissioner Jesse?
Aye.
Commissioner Marin,
Aye.
Commissioner Woodham,
Aye.
Commissioner Samples,
Aye.
Commissioner Sherman,
Aye.
and Chair Castle.
Aye. Next on the agenda is a discussion of the reserve policies and some comparative research. And turn it back
All
over to you.
right, back again. So as you'll recall from our last meeting, this commission had asked for some kind of benchmarking information about reserve policies, including some information about the GFOA recommendations and some information about other cities. So Erin, our new liaison and analyst, has helped pull together a lot of this information. So she'll be a good resource if you have specific questions on these. I think the most important purpose of this item for this commission is to give you a chance to discuss internally, but I will go over some kind of highlights before opening your discussion. So we included in your packet a GFOA kind of paper on their recommendations. Overarching recommendation is that entities do adopt a formal policy. Within this policy, they specify that the government should talk about how to build these reserves and a process to replenish the funds if the entity uses them. And then their basic policy is at a minimum to have 2 months of regular general fund operating revenues or expenditures. Couple considerations that they highlighted are that, governments should look at their particular situation. The 2 months may be less than some governments need. So for example, look at the particular government's exposure to certain types of risks, one-time needs, and volatility in their major revenue sources. And also they say to look at the reserves in a long-term context. So it's not as much about having a specific amount in any given year, but about, planning to have this source of funds or reserve available over time. And just as an overview, we'll take a look at our Redondo Beach reserves. As you know, we have our 8.33% general fund operating reserve that is established in the city's financial principles. Generally, we consider this about 1 month of our operating costs. And this is about $8.6 million. In the financial principles, some uses, including but not limited to, are natural disasters, significant state action, unforeseen deficiencies in major revenues, and unexpected operating and capital expenditures. And in terms of replenishment, the policy states that all unassigned fund balance must go towards replenishment of our reserve before we can use it on other items, if the city has started to use these reserves. In addition to our general fund operating reserve, we do have some other available funds. This includes the PERS reserve, established in 2010, 2011. So that's about $8 million in it currently. And then the city also has established our internal service funds. You're familiar with, including our workers' comp and self-insurance, vehicle replacement, IT replacement. We have a building occupancy fund and several others. For an external kind of evaluation of our reserves policies, I've just included here our most recent bond ratings. Our city treasurer can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe these are our most recent. We have AA1 from Moody's and AA+ from S&P. I was also reminded of a 2012 report. I don't know if anyone in this group or our city treasurer remembers this. The LA County Grand Jury did a survey of charter cities, their financial policies. As part of this, they looked at Redondo Beach. They gave us the highest possible rating on our financial, I wrote it down here, but basically on the city's financial policies. They did give the city a slightly lower rating on overall financial health. And at that point, they did point to the fact that the city does not have the 2 months of reserves. However, the city's response, which I think makes sense, and you can kind of see it in our additional available funds here, is that while we may not have that second month of reserves, the city is effectively planning for a lot of for additional expenditures in some very high vulnerability areas, including our pension costs, our vehicle replacement costs, our workers' comp and insurance costs. So in our view, and as reflected in our bond ratings, that puts us in a position of strength. And so just for the reserves that we put together for your review, we looked at 17 California cities. And as you'll noted, and as we put in the kind of summary, we highlighted the general fund reserve policy, but noted that in addition to this, similar to Redondo Beach, many cities have reserve policies for other funds, including their enterprise and internal services. So just so categorization of some of the policies that we looked at, cities range, so a wide range of policies. You can see most are kind of between this 15 and 25%. If you have over 25% and one city has a 50% reserve. And then the lowest that we noted, which is Long Beach, it's their minimum on a range is a 2% policy. So this is the overview that I'd prepared for you. In addition, in your packet, and we can pull this up if it'd be interesting, is the summary table that we included in your packet, as well as all of the full policies of all of the comparison cities provided. So with that, I'd like to open up to questions and to the Commission's discussion.
So what are you recommending? Just stay at the current level or increase it?
Well, I'll just, the purpose of this presentation, I think, is to give the Commission a jumping off point to discuss amongst yourselves. I'm not the point of making any recommendation. What I'm sharing with you is what the Commission asked for, which is kind of where the city is now, what the GFOA has recommended, and what some other cities are doing. So I'd welcome, the Commission's discussion on this point.
One more question for you, Stephanie.
Sure.
First of all, I want to say thank you for putting this together, because
You're
it
welcome.
was so comprehensive, and all the details, the population numbers, it was perfect. It was all the information that we needed to make sure we're.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So usually, when at the end of the year, when Finance Department presents budget to City Council, they always include their recommendation for a reserve, what they recommend, and then Council ultimately is the one who decides. What do you remember? I don't know if you were here at that time. Do you remember what Finance Department had recommended to Council, how much the reserves should be at that time?
So from my understanding, the practice in the city of Redondo Beach has been for us to make recommendations for spending, and then our recommendation to keep X dollar amount unallocated. So it's not necessarily a percentage. We take it as a given that the city is going to have the 8.33% reserve, and we'll present to them, here's your budget with the 8.33% reserve intact. If we have unallocated fund balance after the recommendations, that's where staff will recommend. We recommend you keep, as we did at carryover, the $300,000 balance. We recommend keeping it unallocated. We could at some point say, we recommend adding this to our CalPERS reserve, or we recommend taking this balance to increase, the 8.33% reserve. In my understanding, for the past years, the Finance Department has not made a recommendation to increase the city's reserves.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, that's a long-winded way of saying, I don't know that we've done that.
Because I wasn't sure if it was because the council did not agree with Finance Department, but now I understand it. Thank you.
And I believe we're just following the council, direction in this area.
So it's not a formal policy, like the 8.33% is not a.
It is a formal
Or it is
policy.
the formal policy?
Yes,
Gotcha.
it is a formal policy. It's in our statement of financial principles. And I believe the city adopted this. Again, I have this in my notes. I believe in 2007.
Okay.
Stephanie,
So it is a formal policy, yes.
let me understand
Sure.
the reserve that we have. Do we really have 8.5 million that we're keeping in reserve, or is it just that
Yes,
we're
we do.
spending 8.5 million less than we expect to?
No, we actually have it in reserve. So if you'll recall, whenever we budget carryover mid-year, we start out with these charts with the general fund balance and we back out non-spendable, assigned, committed. The 8.33% reserve, that's the first number we back out.
So this is actually hard cash that's invested
Actually
in.
hard cash, yes.
That the treasurer invests for us.
Yes.
Okay.
So
idle fund.
I have a question, it might be for you, Treasurer Solomon, as well. We have the money that is in the, I think, the PERS reserve,
Yes.
which is sort of unallocated. If we combine that money and included that with the general reserve, but said within the general reserve, that's for PERS and the other half is for the rest of the budget, we would be essentially at the, close to the 20% mark. We would be high teens, 18%.
Yes.
So it's not as if we would have to save an additional 8.5 million from a budget in 1 year to get there. It could be just how we're allocating or describing our reserves now, and that would get us to the 20%.
To compare apples to apples, the way GFOA defines that minimum 2 months, and other cities, if we want to compare apples to apples, it needs to be from general fund. It's the general fund. It's 2 months from the general fund, not enterprise fund, not PERS fund. It has to be from the general fund.
But our PERS, this is just an internal, it's not it's something that we came up with to define, but it's not mandated anywhere that we have that specific.
Exactly. And from my understanding, we've set this aside as a PERS reserve. It is actually one of our special revenue funds because we created a fund to, make sure we keep it on its own. But to your point, Commissioner or Chair, I don't think there's anything stopping council from saying, we recommend that we put this all together, this $8 million along with our 8.33%. And within that, they can say, we'd prioritize spending this for PERS. I don't see any reason we couldn't do that.
Okay.
You mentioned in your earlier discussion that someone, I don't know if it's a rating agency or someone else, was somewhat critical of the fact that we only had 1 month.
Yes.
And you were mentioning some issues that allowed us to sort of hedge that. What were those again? That some expenditures could be reversed?
I'm going to find this because I copy pasted it into my helpful notes here. Okay. So this is the city's official statement. I believe it came from the mayor at the time. So it says, while the city maintains an unrestricted fund balance slightly below GFOA recommendation, the city has adopted reserve policies that allocate funding for 6 critical areas of PERS payments, workers' compensation, post-retirement employee health benefits, vehicle and equipment replacement, liability insurance, and capital improvements. So again, this was not in response to the rating agencies. Just to be clear, this was in the context of this 2012, this grand jury charter city financial review. I don't know that this had any great significance, but I think the city wanted to make it clear that if you're looking at this specific 20%, it's a narrow way to look at the funds that the city has set aside to deal with the contingencies that reserves are there for.
Okay.
But we should not mix funds. There's a reason we have different funds.
But do other cities have
20% plus PERS reserve as well?
an equipment and a?
I can't, I know a couple, but I don't know if it's not in this. I mean, I don't think it's in the data that you've provided.
But of those issues that you just went through, it seems that there's only one where if push came to shove and we had to come up with more than the 8.3%, the vehicle expenditure fund is the only one that we could really reverse. Those other things seem to me like they have to be spent. So that if we allocate, let's say, $5 million to buy new vehicles, we can defer that if we have to. But those other items that you mentioned I don't think are deferrable.
Well, so for example, our self-insurance fund, we are setting aside, we are contributing funds so
Okay.
that we can pay expected claims costs in the future. I mean, it's similar to if we borrowed from our vehicle replacement fund, we'll need to replace it at some point, right? Because unless we decide not to purchase those vehicles.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a little bit more fungible. I think if we were taking money from these funds that we've set aside, you know, essentially we are borrowing from ourselves down the road, and we'd have to make some decisions.
We can drive
but
older cars for longer than we can
then
not
we
pay
can
a court
defer. Yes, that is
mandated
true.
expenditure, though.
That is true, but at a minimum, we have that, and I mean, the same would be true for our IT equipment replacement. We have emergency communications replacement. So we have funds like that that are kind of proactive financial planning on our part that, as you stated, you know, we could make some other decisions. And, you know, our PERS reserve is, yes, it's a large piece of that.
By the way, how much is in the PERS reserve now? Do you know?
About 8 million.
So other municipalities that I'm aware of, they keep it separate. That money is not part of that, yeah.
This is for unplanned emergencies. Everything you're talking about,
planned.
replacing the equipment, automobiles and all that, these are planned expenditures. Is there any data to show us if or when and to what extent this money was used in the past?
During COVID?
That's a good question.
I haven't seen any cities record or use those reserves as of late. It's just been sitting there as far as I know.
Did we use any, like during COVID or any other, like, that you're aware of?
Torrance used it and they almost ran out of it. They had only $500,000 left from their reserve during COVID. I know that.
I
was a big
believe Santa
deal,
Monica
yeah.
went into their rainy day fund, but they also had, I think they have about 14% plus a rainy day fund, and I believe they did go into the rainy day fund.
But after COVID, all cities started, that's when they started going above 20% because they see that what can happen when something unforeseen happens. If you run out of money in municipality, we're not the federal, we're not the federal government, we can go and print money. We have what we have.
We could, but no one would.
No, we can't. And we don't, yeah, we
How
can't.
much did we get in the past from the state or from the federal government?
During COVID or when?
For any of these natural disasters or unplanned emergencies, did we get?
We got several $1 million for COVID. I don't know how much it was. Was it $4 or $5 million?
I actually do not know that number, but I can look it up,
Yeah.
how much we got from ARPA.
For the next
It
4
was a
years, we are
significant line
not
item.
likely to
It was
get
a
as much
significant amount.
funding from the federal
I just
government
remember, I came in right after
as we got in the past. So that's something we need to keep in
You remember how
mind.
much we got?
And this is why I would really like to see that 8.33 at least raise up to 10% in the next fiscal year and then gradually increase it. Because these are for natural disasters, unplanned emergencies, and we need to beef it up. We just cannot stay at this level, especially in the next 4 or 5 years.
So the description we have here for this fund is it's to be used for emergencies.
Yes.
And I'm not aware of cities around here, how much they've used of these emergency funds. But in places like Ventura County and Oxnard right now that's burning down, or the cities up north, they went through money so fast that they didn't have any. So I guess my question is, this 8.33% was set by the city council at some point in time. We don't know how that number was arrived at. Who within the city does our risk assessment and determines whether that's still a valid number or not and makes a recommendation to the city council?
I think part of the reason we have the discussion, I think Chairperson Allen raised it, saying you should consider raising it to be more in line with what other municipalities are doing. Create a plan and what should that
Roadmap.
final be, but creating a plan, a roadmap to get there and recommend that to city council.
So
that's-
it would be us.
And for
I think
me,
it would be this committee.
it's not a benchmark against other cities, it's a benchmark against our risk.
Yeah,
We don't have a risk of forest fire, we've got a risk of tsunami.
Tsunami, earthquake, yeah.
We need to figure out what our risks are and what a valid number is. And
Greatest risk is earthquakes and
earthquakes.
And I look at
flooding,
other South Bay cities.
I think you did
Oh,
look at
I
other
just
South
want to
Bay
add,
cities, yeah.
make sure you're talking to the mic.
Yeah, and you did look at other South Bay cities as well.
Yes.
Correct, so
And
again,
I just have the
Secondo's
point
there,
of
Torrance is there,
Torrance.
Manhattan
They
Beach is
actually, in
there.
their budget book for this year, they had a section in there talking about how they have a plan to, I guess, pull up their reserves back up to a normal level. So they're trying to get to by 2033, a fiscal year, of putting their reserves back up in place.
Do you
gotcha.
remember where they were off the top of your head?
Or
I mean, I
what's-
know it's buried in there, but was it 20% or do you?
I think they want to get up to 24%,
Okay,
so,
like almost a 10-year period probably.
yeah.
Where they started.
It's a good question you asked, though, about who is our risk, who's our chief risk officer? And I think you're probably looking within this room
Yeah,
at the group.
yeah, I don't think Redondo's not big enough to have that kind of position. I don't think so.
No.
Right? You guys don't have that.
I would just, if, to the extent that we have one, it's probably our HR director.
Yeah. that's-
So she's the one who manages our workers' comp and our insurance, and is taking a look at those things. So, I mean, she would definitely be a key contributor to any discussion in this area.
So I think this would be more like physical risk, and I would look more to building, engineering, planning, the fire department. Those are usually the guys that go out and do disaster mitigation and estimates that get rolled up to FEMA so that you can get funding. So they might have an idea of what the risks might cost if there was some kind of a disaster.
But I think they're also saying, again, the general policy being 2 months or 2 times what we do now is directionally the right way to go. So again, I'm not sure, based on the size of our city, if we have the resources to do a full analysis of exactly what the risk would be versus kind of saying, should we be more in line with either other municipalities in our local area or in line with kind of the general policy?
Then I would do a starting point, and I think you're right, because waiting for a report is
It could
probably
be
a bad
year.
idea.
Yeah, I also don't want to just throw out a number and say, hey,
So
let's
to
go, but.
Start out with a number and like you said, double where we're at, or 20%, and some target for getting there in 2, 3, 5 years, whatever sounds like a reasonable number. At least that's a target to start with.
Exactly.
Pending further detail.
Yeah, and a deeper discussion, so. Again, Chairperson Allen, you, it sounds like you've done this and lived this more than
Yes.
most of us. So again, do you have recommendations or
So
thoughts?
I remember El Segundo, they had, I think it was about 7 years ago, if I can, it might be not accurate, but it was approximately 15%, and then the council requested that it increases. And they do it over time. It doesn't happen in 1 year. But we can have a timeline set that in 5 years, we should get this percent.
Yeah,
and
so
how
I
do
guess that's
we-
the question, is going from 8.33 to
Yes.
15
Mhm.
in 5 years. Like what do we think is a reasonable get to in the amount of years to get there? This is so far outside of my expertise, and I can't speak to it.
It depends on the city's expenses and how much the council is willing to save. You know, it's almost like our personal budget, right? If I don't buy the new shoes, I can put that in my savings account.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to do in a city.
Yeah.
So we might not want to replace those lights and put the money into reserves.
So we're trying to get like another 8 million, that's 1.6 million a year over 5 years.
Mhm.
So is that reasonable? Is that too aggressive? Let's see, it's 1.5% of our budget, or maybe a little less, ballpark.
Typically, our year-end excess funds are a few $100,000 at most. So literally what we're talking about is the council and the various departments have to find a way to cut their budget
Yeah.
by $1 million a year.
Or again, the hope that our revenues go up with TOT and other things like that, but that's also
But something has to,
aspirational.
something has to happen that's $1 million plus a year, in addition to the few $100,000 that we usually use for last minute expenses and,
Yep.
and discretionary.
Discretionary projects, exactly, so.
Yeah.
Money will be earning interest. It's not being spent, right?
Yeah, but it's still $1 million a year
Yeah, I
for
understand.
7 years instead of 8.
Another example I want to give is the city of Torrance. So in 2020, they almost ran out of all their reserves. And then now it's back to 20%. So that was only done in 4 years.
Sure,
Because
but
it's a
I would assume a lot of
commitment
the
that you
federal
make.
government, I would assume federal government money came in and they allocated it straight to that.
So it was
versus-
strategically done. It was, sometimes you don't give the raises you need to give, or whatever it is you need to hold back. You don't purchase the vehicles every 5 years. You purchase it every 10 years. So those are decisions that Torrance made, so that they get up to that number quickly.
A big part of this exercise is going to be deciding what our risks are. Simply telling city council we'd like to set aside $1.5 million a year is a non-starter, because we don't have $1.5 million, and there's no way in hell we're going to get it unless the risk is really real that we're going to need it. And I don't know, you can look at parts of the budget. If we had an earthquake and no one came to the hotels in Redondo for a year, we know what that would cost us. That would cost us the total TOT, and that's $7-8 million, right? So if we think there's a high risk of something like that or similar events happening that hurt that revenue budget, then that's something that we could take to city council as a realistic possibility. I don't know what the risks are of an earthquake, but one of the things that
Another
came out of this
COVID,
discussion.
another virus, another,
Yeah.
I mean, who?
The risks are the ones you can't see.
One of the things that came out of this discussion tonight is I'd forgotten that we survived 2020 because we had federal support. If we hadn't had that, we would have had to go into that $8 million reserve for about $4 million. I remember the number being in the range of 4 or 5 million, 4.5 million or so. So there's a real risk that an event like that is going to hurt our budget, and we can't always depend on the feds to step in with that money.
And as Commissioner Jesse said, in the next 4 years, we're probably not going to receive a lot of federal help.
Well, whether you do or not, COVID was interesting because there was no property damage. The other events that we're talking about are all property damage. It takes time to rebuild. If there's an earthquake and hotels or the pier or our other businesses are damaged and it takes a year or 2 or 3 to rebuild them, we have no revenue from them while they're being rebuilt. So we may get $4 million from the federal government, but we still got to wait for those businesses to come back online before we get continuing revenue.
It's a double whammy, yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't know. No one knows. That's why it's called reserves, emergency
I think what
funds.
we're all agreeing on here is 8.33 was adopted at some point in time when somebody.
2007.
2007.
It needs to be.
Okay, well,
yeah.
if we do inflation, what should the number be?
Why don't we,
Percentage covers inflation. It's just
that's a good way to start. Maybe we should take that number and calculate inflation.
But again, it's a percentage of our total budget, so I think inflation would, you could say it's got baked into it.
Right.
But it's again, the argument being that 8% is just not enough.
Right. And then I think the other question is, do we do it over 5 years or do like Manhattan over 10 years? Then it's only 800,000. And usually we have a couple of $100,000 left over at the end of the year, which might be literally $250,000. But then, Treasurer Solomon and his investment acumen and his crystal ball, exceed our budget on investment income. And I mean, things like that.
He says he doesn't have a crystal ball, though.
Maybe it's a magic 8 ball. But pretty soon we're getting close to at least $500,000 without cutting anything out of the budget. And it would just be some of those end of the year discretionary projects that would get pushed off.
We're not making a hard decision here. We're making a recommendation.
Right.
So I think if we make what we think is a valid recommendation. It's up to the city council and the finance department and the treasurer's department, the city manager to figure out how close they can get to that recommendation, or maybe they can exceed it.
Or the path to get there. So is it just a recommendation
So
that
it's recommendation
we
that
increase this to be in, you know?
this number is too small, and we would recommend that it be, that the policy be reviewed and the risk be reviewed and get there.
I think that's a good point.
That's great.
That's all we can do.
Yes,
And that's what we should do,
Okay.
and make that recommendation.
yes. And they probably don't even know, because this is not something that finance department does on a regular basis, on annual basis, to let them know what their reserves are. So they probably don't even know, and they don't even think about
Or
it.
they may know what they have, but they may not know that it's not, it may not be.
They don't know that,
Doesn't
yeah,
be
recommend is
sufficient. Right.
20%, or they just, they're relying on us to make sure that we communicate.
I think our important point is this reserve is separate and apart from the other funds that we have. So it is for
Unforeseen.
unforeseen emergencies. We can foresee that we have a CalPERS payment. We can foresee that we need to buy trucks or radio equipment or whatever it is. Those are known.
Yes,
So
and that's
this
a
is unknown.
separate emergency
So
fund.
this is unknown. The last time this was reviewed was in 2007.
2007.
So it's been
Yeah.
17 years. It appears to be too small. We don't know what the risks are. We think it should be reconsidered.
Do we want to go as far as to say, looking at targeting 2 months or 20%?
I think we suggest that.
Suggest that.
as a
And-
possibility.
That's like a 20% recommendation.
Recommend.
Sounds reasonable for us. Yeah.
Okay.
When you were looking at other cities, did any cities use a line of credit as a stopgap measure and a reserve? And you can,
Not that I saw.
I don't think we can.
well, I think
Never-
we
I would
can,
never
we
call
can,
that.
we can borrow,
I've never
we could
s-
borrow money from a bank if the city
I've-
council
I've
agreed on
never
it.
seen
And,
that.
and in an emergency, it could only be used in an emergency because you've got to repay it. If you've got hard cash sitting there, you can liquidate that and you don't have to repay it. But it might be
I don't think we can do that carrying over to the next fiscal year. We might be able to take short-term loans within the fiscal year, but I don't think we
I
can carry
don't-
into the
You
I
might-
didn't know
you might be
banks
right, I
just
don't know.
loan to cities like that. No.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, no, yeah.
And just looking back at 2008, one of the first things that banks started doing was reneging on credit lines when the whole financial markets seized.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And they, their response was, "We'll sue us," So I wouldn't want to rely 100% on that.
Yeah.
I have to apologize to the commission. The reserve policy is actually 2001.
Okay.
So
23 years,
2007.
it's almost a quarter of a
2000.
century. So I think we need to update that policy.
It'd be interesting if you have the ability to go back and look at the budgets, to see what happened during 2007 and 8.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole world was coming to an end in that period of time. So it'd be interesting to see how much our revenue dropped.
Yeah.
If it
and
did
see
drop
what
at
happened
all.
to the reserve.
We laid off people, we shut down services. It was pretty ugly.
Was it?
And if you heard the fire department just last year when they were talking about their MOU, they still haven't recovered in terms of salaries from the cuts that they accepted back in 2007, 2008.
Wow. And I would think that the 2007 and 8 economic debacle is more likely than a pandemic to reoccur. But that's spitballing, no one knows, but it sure seems like it.
Do we want to make a motion, I guess, as a recommendation to?
Can you say what you said again? I think you had a good.
If you didn't write down what I said.
I just want to add into, there's no e-comments right now.
I'd like to make a recommendation to the city council that the current policy of 8.33% be reviewed and updated to reflect current risks. The Budget and Finance Commission considers a starting point at being double what it currently is, subject to further review, with a goal of achieving that within 7 years?
7 to 10.
7 to 10 years? Yeah.
Gotta start somewhere.
Got to start somewhere.
Yeah, what he said. I
I
second.
second that.
I second that, yeah.
We're going to second.
And we have no public comments?
Sorry.
Okay.
Did you get that on tape so you can write it down?
There are no public comments and no one on Zoom.
Okay.
And one thing I want to ask staff, if you, when you present this to council, would you please include all these attachments that you included for us so that they see what other cities have and they see what GFOA recommends?
So as a point of just process, and I may need to clarify this with the city clerk or our city treasurer, I don't know if this would be better coming as a letter or a formal communication from the commission
Okay.
that we could, city treasurer Solomon, am I?
If I may, I would suggest, agree with the finance director. I would have a letter drafted to be presented to the city council. It would then be up to the city council, as far as their process is concerned, to agendize a discussion of this. Or they could make a referral to have this discussion take place during the budget season.
Okay.
So I would think in your letter, I'm sorry, in your letter, I would go ahead and identify if you'd like to have them perhaps agendize this prior to the budget season or in the budget season. It would also, I think, help if they had this discussion prior to budget season for the city finance department in creating the budget. Because as you all very well know, it can get pretty hectic in creating those budgets at the time. If there's going to be a recommendation of council that an additional CapEx be contributed, we would need to account for that because we're required to bring you a balanced budget.
It would have to take place as soon as possible so that everyone is prepared for that as they're preparing their budgets.
Yep.
Oh, yes.
So I would express that urgency in a letter to the council and suggest you select somebody from your commission to draft that letter.
So I'll modify my motion to suggest that the commission approve the chair to.
The chair. The spotlight.
Somebody that's not me. Draft a letter to the city council recommending whatever just got recorded.
You can go back on YouTube and
Yeah.
watch it.
Yeah.
That's what I used to.
Thank you. And recommend that they agendize it and discuss it at their earliest opportunity.
Do you have a second?
Second.
And could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Allen?
Aye.
Commissioner Jesse?
Aye.
Commissioner Marin?
Aye.
Commissioner Woodham?
Aye.
Commissioner Samples?
Aye.
Commissioner Sherman? One last time.
Aye.
Chair Castle?
Aye. Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda, are there any member items or referrals to staff?
I have a question. We approved the $93 million bond issue for fire and police. I assume we're going to do an RFP for an investment banker again. How is that going to be handled? Will we be involved in that, or will the two of you, how is it going to be done?
So when the final results come forward, hopefully they'll hold up as where they are now at the 71% level with the voters approving that. We've begun having an internal discussion as to process should that election result be confirmed by the county registrar. Once that happens, yes, Commissioner Woodham, we would go out to select municipal advisory group, bond council, and then the group that would help us with the bond issuance. all of those components would be part of a process of interviewing several candidates. What part of that would be an official RFP? What part of that would be an RFI or some other variation thereof? I believe the bond component of it would, the people who would be doing the issuance would be an RFP process.
And to your question about this commission's involvement, we'll definitely be, our plan, which we are working out as we speak, is to share our recommendations at various stages in the process with this commission for your input. So you will definitely be very involved and very informed. We are planning, I believe, to take an item to council with kind of an overall strategy and plan on December 3rd. I believe that's scheduled. So that's kind of our first overview of the process. But you'll definitely be, involved and informed throughout the process.
If I recall our process with the lease revenue bonds we had at the Budget and Finance Commission meeting, there were at least two presentations, I believe 2 presentations from our municipal advisory group at the time, which was Cosmont. Larry Cosmont and Dan Masiello came and presented to us.
Okay, any other referrals to staff? Okay, all right, thank you. We are adjourned. For the last time.
Your last guess.